Hello juniors and welcome back to programming. For this video we'll be going over reading and writing in Python. So this is reading and writing two .txt files. So the first thing you're going to do is open up Eclipse and make a new project that's called rewrite. So you'll go file, new, pydev project, and you'll name it read, write following camel casing. I already have this so I can't click finish, but otherwise you'll click finish and then it'll pop up. Then once you have that, you're going to go onto Canvas and download the read-write outline.py. And you'll put that into your read-write project folder. And you'll complete that as I go along and show you how to do the read-write syntax. For now, I'm going to make a .py called practice. And I'll be doing all of my stuff on here. So let's go over the general structure of reading and writing. So the syntax is as follows. First, we open up a file. So what we'll do is we'll have a file, or we'll have a variable that will hold that file. So we'll make a variable and we'll open whatever the file name is, and we'll have a different mode. So there's different modes. Now look, this is a function. We're calling this function called open, and we'll provide two parameters, a file name and a mode. So the first part is the file name, which is the name of the file we want to open. If the file is in the same folder, then it can just be the file name. If the file is in a different folder from your .py, so we know that my .py practice is in my read-write folder. If the file is in a different folder than this, you can't see it right here, then we're going to have to use a file path, which will look something like this. You'll have the C drive, folder, and then whatever the file name is. So most of the time you'll just be manipulating files that are right here within your in your project folder. And that's normally best practice, is you keep that txt within the same project folder. So that's the file name. The second part is the mode. So there's a couple different types of modes. There's the R mode, which is read. This is the read mode, represented by an R. When you open a file in this mode, you can only read the file. The next type of mode is W, which is the write mode. When you open a file in this mode, you can only write in the file. When you write to a file with W, you overwrite any other data in that file. So basically you delete everything and start writing at line 1 on the file. The next one is A, which this is append mode, represented by the A. When you open a file in this mode, you can only write to files, but anything you write is appended to the end of the file. So instead of deleting everything or overwriting everything in the file, it just adds it to the end of the file. So it's like write, except it doesn't delete all the previous stuff that's in a file. So that's nice if you're trying to just add more things to a txt. The last one is R+. So this is read and write mode, which is represented by the R and the plus character. When you open a file in this mode, you can read and write to the file. If you write to the file, it does overwrite whatever was previous there. If you don't put a mode, then like if you don't put anything here for the second parameter, it will just open the file in R mode. So this is the default mode, is R. So with the file, once we open one, there's all these different functions that we have available. So I'm going to copy a couple of them over here so that you can see them. So we have .read, .read lines, or .read line, .read lines, .write, and .write lines. So .read returns the whole file in one string. .read line returns a line of returns the first line, whatever line, as a string. And then read lines returns the whole file as a list, and each line is an index. So at 0, index 0, it'll be the first line, and at index 1, it'll be the second line. Then we're on to the write functions. The file.write string allows you to write one string data on there. File.write lines allows you to write a list on there, so you can write each item in the list on a separate line. We'll go through all these. Give you an example of all these. Last one you're going to do is file.close. And this closes the file, and you got to do this after every time you open a file so that you don't have a lot of data open. Every time you open a file, that's opening up all the data inside of that, and that's a very large variable when you're talking about the size of your program and how much data or memory and storage it's taking up on your computer. So if you open a file and never close it, you're opening this file and it has all this storage and memory that it's using, even though you're not even using it. So when you're done with it, you just do file.close. And it's just like a return statement at the end of the function. It just closes it off, and you know that that file is done with. So let's try doing this. When we are using the open function, like when we're using this to open a file, if we put a file name that doesn't already exist, then it will create that file. So, for example, let's do file equals open, and we'll put new file.txt. Now remember that this part is just a variable. So you could put var, you could put f, you could put file. I normally put file just because it's easy to remember. But if you're opening a specific file, you can put like a file name or like file students. If I was opening up a file on all of my students, I could put that. You want it short normally because you don't want to you're going to have to retype that every time. Just note that whatever you put here, you're going to have to put over here. So just so that you have a bunch of different examples, I'm going to put f. But now whenever we want to do the function, we're going to do f.whatever because we have to reference which file we want to open. So we're doing f.whatever. So let's write our name into this file. We'll do file.write, and we'll just do Michael. You can do whatever your name is. My name is Michael. So .write just takes any string to the file. It just writes that string, Michael, to the file. But it can also write variables. So I could have also done name equals Michael and then file.write name. And that does the same thing. So I'm going to delete that because these two things. Oh, also, I got to make sure to use f, not file, because that's the variable that we used to open it, or that's what we named our variable, our file that we opened. We opened this file and we named it f. And actually, we didn't even open this in the right mode. I forgot this. You need a W there because we want to open up in write mode so that we can write to it. So now let's try doing this with a list. Whoops, that did not say list. List equals brackets Python programming and coding. What is going on? Okay, there we go. So we've got three things in this list. Now we can try this f.write list. Whoops, not write list, write lines. And then we're going to put in our list that we just wrote. So now it's going to write each of these list elements to it. So it'll write Python, then programming, then coding. Now since we're done with this file, let's do f.close. Now let's run this program and we'll actually watch new file pop up right in here. So let's go drop down, run as Python run. So nothing happens except you see new file pop up. Now with Eclipse, you can open this up and it'll open up in the text editor. But look at that. It shows Michael, Python, programming, coding, all in one line. It doesn't show it in separate lines. This is because the functions, the write functions, all of this write and write lines, they do not write onto separate lines. Unlike if I write a print statement, that prints to a new line each line. If we want to add new lines, we'll have to type them using an actual character. And the character is denoted by a backward slash and an end. So the backward slash tells Python, okay, we are no longer, like this is no longer just text. This is something special. And then you add an N for new line. You can also do \T, and that adds a tab. So N is new line, T is tab. We don't really use it. We don't really use N that much unless we're writing something like this. So let's go through and add an N to each of our strings. So we added it to Michael, added it to Python, and now added to coding. Now notice how this turns green once we add this, because this is how you'd write these these quotations in there. If you want an actual quotation in this, let me just run this for example and go over here. Now it puts this quotation in there. So that's how you can put, the quotation. That's how you can put a quotation in there, is adding that backslash, and that allows it to be in there. Just remember to put the final one that ends this whole thing. That was a side note. Again, we're just adding /n to all these so that now each of these will have a new line. And notice there's 5 lines because after coding, whoa, look at that. We can look at them both. After coding, we added a /n, which makes a new line, which means that we have an empty space at the end of our line. So now we have the Michael, Python, programming, and coding all on different lines. So now let's try these read functions that we have. Let's open the file again, and we'll have it as the same name. So new file.txt, don't forget the .txt, and this time we'll open it in read mode. And first, what we're going to do is we're just going to do print f.readLine. And that's going to print the first line. It's going to read the line, the first line of the function, and print it. So read the first one and then print it. So let's try it. Run the program. And there it goes. It read the very first line. God dang it. It read the first line, which was Michael, and then printed it out. So that did exactly what we expected it to do. Notice now, if we do this again, let's do this a different way. We'll put it in a variable. We'll say x is f.readLine, and then we print x. If we run this now, it'll print Michael, then Python. And remember, it's got that new line in there, so it's going to print that new line as well. Because since it's a print statement, it always starts on a new line. And there's probably an extra one down here as well. But now it's going to read the second line. So Python remembers where we were in the file and always reads the next line. That's how read line works. It always reads the next line. So now let's try it with read lines, plural. If we do print f.readLines, parentheses, if we print this out, it's going to print out programming and coding because it still remembers where we are. It printed out the first line and remembered that, Michael. Then it printed out the second line, Python. And now it took the last 2 lines, coding, programming and coding, and made it into its own list. Notice that since 5 is empty, it didn't bring in that 5th line. But notice that it returns the whole file as a list from wherever we were. So it starts wherever we ended. It doesn't include the ones that we've already read. That's why it's important to close after each time you open the file, because you may want to start back at the beginning. So I guess it's not important to close every time. It's still important to close, but it's important to keep track of that. So if you want to start back at the beginning of the file, you have to close the file and open it back up again. It prints in this format because read lines is technically returning a list. So since this is how lists are printed out, if I were to print out list, that's kind of what it would look like. So now we've done all the different types. We'll do f.close just to have a full thing. But we've tried all of these except for .read, and that just returns the whole file as a string. So you'll just have all of this stuff as one thing again. If you want to test this out and play around with them, try the different modes, go ahead. It's kind of fun, and you can do some cool things with it, and you can make lots of files just practicing and learning how it works. For now, we're going to move on to the errors. So I'm going to save, and we're going to talk about errors with read writing. So remember that an error or bug is something that's wrong with the program. So there's two types of errors, syntax and logical. The syntax error means that there's a problem with the program's syntax. Logical error means that there's a problem with the program's logic. So again, you have all the syntax for the different functions and the actual opening of the file. So if we mess up any of these pieces, forget the dot, forget one of these letters, use the wrong name. So you saw me kept using file instead of F. However you open the file as, whatever you save this variable as, you got to use that same one throughout. But you can name it whatever and just make sure you're using it the same thing. The most common error, other than like mistyping, is missing the parentheses. If you miss one of these parentheses on the different functions, it's really easy, and it happens a lot. For logic errors, there's not, again, a common logical errors because, or common logical error, because there's all these different files and functions. So depending on what you're trying to do, there's different logical errors. So for logical errors, some common ones are trying to read the file while in write mode, or the other way. So if you try to read do a read line when you opened it under write mode, that's an error, or that's a logical error, because you told the program you were just going to write it and you read it. So it confuses the program and throws an error. Another logical error is trying to manipulate the file before opening it. If you forget to open this file, then how are you supposed to write to it? It doesn't know where to write to. And another logical error is forgetting to close the file, because that can lead to errors further down in your program. So now that we've covered all of this, you should have enough to go through and complete the read-write outline activity. You should have downloaded that and followed along with the video as I was going through all this. Then you're going to go to the drills. Here's the .py, and we can take a look at this. And you're just going to do all the things. So this is all for writing a file. This is all for reading a file. And you're just going to try out these different functions. Then once you finish that, you'll submit that on the activity prompt following the GitHub submission process. You'll go to the debug read-write drills, and you'll have all these different functions. Again, you don't need to focus on the functions because we're done with the functions unit. There's nothing wrong with the functions or the calling. It's just stuff with the reading. So all the stuff with this opening and the .read lines and all that. There's 3 errors in all of these different ones. Just try to find the errors and fix them. Look for syntax and logical errors. Again, only pay attention to errors associated with read and write. Use common errors that we covered to search the functions and find those errors. and then use the function's descriptions to check for logical errors. So this tells you what the function is supposed to do, and you can look at it and say, is this doing what it's supposed to do? Then once you complete that, you're done for this unit. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to us. Otherwise, juniors, I will see you later.